lovely people. For today's episode, I've got two people here with me, two of my mates, Matt and Tom, and we're gonna be reviewing Drive to Survive Season 3. So, cheers for coming on, lads. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Matt. I've been a Formula One fan probably since the mid 90s. So I got into it through friends and family, really. I think I watched sort of in the Senna era, but my first race where I actually sat down and watched the whole thing was 1996. And that was Monaco. So that was the first race I actually watched through. So I've been to a few Grand Prix. I've been to Monza, I've been to Silverstone. I'm an avid fan.
Very good. I'm Tom. I've been a Formula One fan for about 20 years or so, in terms of really actually paying attention to the sport. My idol in the sport is the great man himself, Michael. And yeah, I think we've got some really good, talented drivers in the field this year. So I can't wait to get into the new season.
Yeah, and cheers for that, lads. I mean, I suppose if you've been watching my channel, guys, you don't need me to introduce myself, but I do Formula One race reviews on my channel. I really love doing them, but let's get into this review.
Cool. So we've all seen Drive to Survive Season 3. And I think considering the current sort of situation, everybody has been looking forward to this. And I think it's long awaited. I think so. First impressions, I think that I sort of, when I first started watching it, it was as good, if not better, than the previous seasons.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I think Netflix they're really sort of tapping into that open market, if you want, bringing new fans to the sport as well, because the production of it it's top notch, and it gives you an insight into the workings of a Formula One team. And after the season that we had last season, it had to pull out all the stops, really. So I mean, I agree with that.
Yeah, I can only concur. I mean, when Matt messaged me to do it and suggested to do this review, I actually binge watched the whole season in a day. I literally sat here and watched it. Literally from 9 till about 10 or something it was. I loved it. It was always great, but I think they left a few key moments out.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, I was really upset that they didn't even show anything about Nico Hülkenberg. Because I think that was absolutely that was a great performance he did, and I think that they should have put at least some bits of him in there. Not
even
just
mention the fact he came back.
Yeah. No. I mean, and how could you leave out arguably the best race for the last, I don't know, like maybe 10 years. Turkey, absolute racing at its finest right there. Had everything in that race, and they not even. I mean, it's possible that Netflix weren't there, so maybe that's why. Obviously they can only make content on what they've got the rights to, but at the same time, like you say, like missed out some really key points of the season, really. So,
yeah. And I'm not just saying that because my second favorite driver is Nico Hülkenberg, but let's just gloss over that for this review.
Yeah, I mean, my only criticisms of the series was, I did actually think it was great. I think they could have actually shown a little bit about George as well, driving for Mercedes, because that was really exciting. Not having Lewis in his car. Obviously, he came down with COVID, and having that super sub, and it was such a performance as well. He almost won that Grand Prix twice, and in this heartbreak, they could have caught a bit of that. The only other thing as well that I would say is a bit more about the production side of things. I think I've spoken to Tom about this before in the past, where I don't like the fake F1 noises.
Oh, it's like Hollywood. It's like
the cars are braking, and yet there does sound on it where they're just where they're just accelerating, and then some of the commentary just obviously just made for the series.
I think a lot of the stuff from Will Buxton and Ben Edwards seems to be sort of added in. I mean, they're both very well respected in the Formula One community, but it seems like you say, like a lot. Obviously, Will Buxton makes the documentary with Netflix because he is the Formula One man. But yeah, like you say, it does seem to be a bit kind of like overproduced in a lot of sense, and I think that's because they want to make it entertaining for people that aren't like us. It's for people that aren't watching every Grand Prix. This is essentially going to be their season in a nutshell. But yeah, I mean, if you really want the drama from the sport, watch the sport. I mean, they're not all like Abu Dhabi or like Monaco. They're not all processional, easy races. Like a lot of the time, as I was saying to Raz before, a lot of races are the midfield battles, for instance, are just incredible. But
I mean, even Monza was just, who would have predicted what would have happened at Monza this year?
No, exactly.
Last year, sorry.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else to add on that point, Raz?
No. I think we covered it all.
Yeah. Cool. So the season sort of goes over then to sort of opening with Racing Point. The fact that obviously they had a massive financial crisis the season before, went into administration, and then was taken over by the Stroll family. Well, Lawrence Stroll. So on that, I before didn't really care much for the Strolls, and I didn't really know much about Lawrence Stroll. But after watching that part of the documentary, I actually ended up quite liking him. I thought he was quite direct, very to the point. He's obviously doing a lot. He saved the team. He saved a lot of jobs. Obviously now we know he's bringing Aston Martin into Formula One. Also, I've never really been a massive fan of Lance Stroll, but again, I think I've just, from watching that episode, I've got a lot of respect for him now. I think he really actually has tried hard in F1. He clearly loves it. He's got a lot of passion for it. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that bit?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Matt, because I saw, Lawrence only bought the team to have his son in Formula One. But after watching this episode, I really do think he genuinely cares about the sport, and especially how when he did this speech, I think Sky actually included that one in their coverage when the whole thing about the pink Mercedes came, and he got really animated, and I think that really showed that he's not just in it for his son. He genuinely cares about the team. I don't know what you guys think about it.
No, 100%. You can tell when someone's passionate about something by the way they talk about it. And you look at, when you get when Martin Brundle does his grid walk before a race, and you see all the celebrities that he's talking to, like, especially at Monaco or in any American Grand Prix, these celebrities are there because they've been told to be there. They don't care about the race. They don't care about the sport. They're there because they either been told to be there by some company or because the status thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They don't care. They don't give a fig about the sport. But Lawrence Stroll, and the same goes for like Doralton, for instance, taking over Williams. I don't think they really care about the sport. They just, they're a management company. That's what they're there to do. But Lawrence Stroll, when you hear him, like watching that episode, when you hear him talking about the sport, you hear his passion for the sport as well. He's not just talking about what he can get from the sport, it's what he can bring to the sport. And to touch on Lance, it's a difficult one with him. He's always going to have that sort of stigma against him because his dad is now a team owner, and obviously was involved in Williams when he was driving there. But you look at his racing history, like pre-Formula One. He's won races. He's won championships at the junior level. He's not a fool for anyone.
He's got Formula One podiums as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And a pole position.
Yeah. Again, if you're gonna this kind of brings back to the whole point about them not putting Turkey or anything about Turkey in there. I think they must not have been at Turkey, because if you're going to do an episode on Racing Point, you have to cover that. He had a great pole position in very, very testing circumstances.
Yeah.
In a to a point where the car didn't really make a difference there. Everyone was struggling. And then at the beginning of the race, that first two stints of the race, he was comfortable. He was really comfortable. It was the third stint, I think it was, or it might have been the second stint, sorry, where the tyres just didn't warm up, whatever it was. That's what lost him the race. And then his head dropped, his confidence dropped. And that's, really positive for him. And I think once he gets used to being in a front-running team, he'll get that confidence that comes with it. And I think it's, it's potentially, this season could be really good for him going forward. But last season, I think that, like you say, watching Drive to Survive, and again, the way that he talks about the sport, he's not just there to have fun. He wants to win races. He wants to, do well in the sport. So
I always got the impression that he was sort of being made to do it, but now you can sort of tell that he's there. Yeah, as you said, I think there was one of the quotes when he was at Abu Dhabi. He was like, "I love my job."
Yeah.
So he would have loved to be a Formula One driver, but he genuinely loves it. Cool. Okay. So F1 was due to start in Australia, as it always is. The teams were there, fans were there, everything's there, all ready to go. They've done their track walks, and then they hear, obviously, we all know, people started getting sick, and COVID began to take over the world. Less said about that bit, the better. But in terms of F1, and they few, what was it, McLaren, one of their mechanics came down sick first, I think it was saying.
Yeah, I think they were the first ones, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. And then that was it, and then they made the decision to sort of, stop the race, postpone it. And then it wasn't just Australia, it was then China.
Vietnam, the race that never was.
Yeah.
And never will be.
I personally think I personally thought that we weren't going to have a 2020 season.
Yeah.
For a long time, it did look like that. And as we sort of were discussing before, the Formula One virtual Grand Prix and the sort of latter championship they had going on there, that sort of filled a gap.
There was good space fillers, and you got to see a lot of more of their personalities. I actually, during that period, I got to like Lando Norris a lot more. I thought he was really, really funny, and
he had zero luck in the virtual Grand Prix, though. I think he only managed to actually race in one of them because his connection just kept on dropping.
But can I tell you something, lads? I actually think. Obviously, the COVID is bad, but for me, lockdown was the best thing that came out of lockdown for me is the fact that let me explain. I've always said that in the future I want to have one time I want to have a gig with Sky, and because I'm in a wheelchair I can't travel that well, but because of like the lockdown, people were forced to have got used to like Zoom and virtually. So I think in that respect it actually helped me. Now people don't necessarily have to be somewhere to be part of a program. You see what I mean? And
no, definitely.
And also in when you think about it, I managed to speak to a lot of F1 celebrities, and I believe that if lockdown didn't happen, I think that wouldn't have been as possible. So,
well, without all the lockdowns we had, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And obviously we're up there with the highest of F1 celebrities. So.
Of course. I think that the thing for me that came out of it, obviously it's good, Raz, that you really have come into your own sort of like with your interviews. But then in terms of racing, we went to places where we never thought we were going to go again. Turkey, we got Imola back, Portimao. Now, I never really liked Portimao on paper, but what a track that is.
On paper,
really nice.
It looks like a mix between Bahrain and Spain. On paper, you look at the layout of the track, it's very similar to those.
The undulations on it, and it's great to have Formula One back in Portugal. Obviously, I remember watching races from the 80s and 90s in Estoril, and obviously Senna's first win was in on a Portuguese track, and just going back there, I think was really good for the sport. And then obviously that amazing race in I forgot the name of it now, it was Mugello.
Mugello, yeah.
Oh, that was incredible.
That
track was
amazing.
Yeah. They didn't show that one much in Netflix either.
No.
So, yeah.
Well, there wasn't an awful lot of Haas in that race, so you couldn't really show much of them. But Yeah, no, that was an incredible race. But I mean, obviously we've got new tracks coming in this season with Jeddah, which I think it looks more of a driver's circuit than a spectator's circuit. It looks like it'd be amazing fun to drive, but I don't think there's going to be an awful lot of racing on it.
Overtaking even.
Yeah,
but we'll leave this bit for the preview, which is what I'll leave to say. This, yeah.
Last season with as you say, like Portimao, as you say, I think that was a great advert for the sport. And again, same with Turkey, like great advert for the sport there. So, and neither of those were covered on Drive to Survive, which is supposed to be an advert for the sport. But
well, I think in a sense, though, Drive to Survive is an advert for the sport. I mean, just going back to that point, touching on it. I mean, if you look on Netflix right now, it is still number one in the UK. Which is incredible. Which is hope. I mean, I hope personally that this series really does spawn a lot of new Formula One fans. I mean, because dare I say it, could Formula One get as big as football? I doubt it, but it's nice to have more people. I find nowadays more of my friends are more interested in F1 than 10, 15 years ago.
Sure. It's all about accessibility as well. Like, football is the number one sport in the world because it's so accessible. You literally don't even need a ball. You can have a can and play football.
No. Yeah, totally agree.
And stuff like Drive to Survive, the YouTube content creators like Raz himself, and then the ones that are playing the Formula One game, that brings the sport to a group of people that might not necessarily be interested or think they were interested in it before. And living in the UK, you have, if you want to watch the races live, you have one option, and that option is to spend £40 a month to watch on at least. I mean, that's just for the Formula One channel, but I think you also have to have the sports channels on top of that to get the Formula One channel. I might be wrong, but so watching Formula One in the UK, unless you are happy watching just the highlights on Channel 4, watching Formula One live in the UK is a very expensive business. So watching something like Drive to Survive might be the only synopsis or the review of the season for a lot of people. So it's, I think, like you say, it's definitely a great advert for the sport in that sense. So
and I think they're doing a great job with showing the behind the scenes, like in the garage, and like, because before Drive to Survive came along, that's the sort of documentary style series that I always wished for. You see, just seeing behind the scenes and
they did a few in the past. I remember one they did one on Jordan. They did a documentary on Eddie Irvine as well. I remember, and they were pretty good. But
I'm sure it was probably made by Eddie Irvine, filmed by Eddie Irvine, written by Eddie Irvine.
But and I also like the fact that when Günther Steiner was negotiating with, I think it was the German sponsor, 1&1, who is actually they are actually German. For those of you who want to know a bit more about them, I've done a video on
saw that
on them. I linked that in the corner, but I really enjoyed a bit of, not too much of the negotiations for obvious reasons, but I actually quite enjoyed the fact that there was a little bit of that in there.
Cool.
Like you say, seeing the inner workings. But sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say so. So yeah, after F1 COVID response, and then I think just to summarise that, I think for me, watching, you don't really have a lot of it on the series, but they obviously just on a separate point. F1 is so diverse these days, and they'll manage to book themselves on extra tracks, even though it's behind closed doors. So I thought that was really, really good. And then the series then ventures on to Mercedes. And I think they heavily focused on Bottas.
Definitely so, yeah.
And I think they touched on Lewis a bit. But it was mainly basically Bottas and how hard it is to be Lewis Hamilton's teammate.
Yeah, and I think that was done. Intentionally, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because
I think Lewis gets a lot of airtime because he's 7-time world champion. So everyone can sort of get an idea of how it must feel to be him. But like you say, like, how does it feel to be playing second fiddle to arguably the greatest?
I think he even says, being called a rear gunner hurts and things like that. And Bottas has got pace. I mean, everyone forgets the fact for the last few years he has come second in the championship. He's a talented driver. I just think that obviously he's gone down the Rubens Barrichello road, really, with Lewis, and hopefully, when Lewis decides he's had enough of F1, Bottas will then get his chance. Maybe at Mercedes, maybe somewhere else. Who knows? But I'd like to think he's got a few race wins in him.
Can I just say something? I mean, I don't want to put it down on Bottas, but I think unless Lewis Hamilton retires and Valtteri Bottas stays at Mercedes, there's no chance, of if he doesn't stay at Mercedes, there's no chance of him getting the title.
No, I don't think Bottas has got a title in him. I'll be honest. I think there's other drivers out there who are just. I mean, he's a really, really cool guy. Don't get me wrong, but I think that there are other drivers out there which would literally skin him alive. Mr. Verstappen being the main one.
Well, I mean, look at that young contingent and sort of the entirety. Like, I mean, Charles got great pace, and Lando, last lap Lando at the Red Bull Ring.
That was incredible. When they should have touched on that a little bit earlier, but that was great. That was really good, and I think they covered that really well in the series.
Well, it's high action, great racing. Like it's what people want from Formula One in a nutshell.
It's such an effort as well. Such an effort he did for that lap.
And also one thing they missed out on, and I know that you are quite upset about it, actually, Matt and Tom also, was the fact that they didn't actually cover anything of George Russell stepping into the Mercedes at the when Lewis Hamilton contracted COVID.
I mean, they barely even touched on that at all. Like literally in the last episode of the season, I think it was, they said, "Oh, you're back," and that was a quick turnaround. That was it. Literally, that was it. But coming back to Bottas, I think you look at when he was at Williams, he had good pace in that car. I mean, it was a vastly different Williams team to that, which is unfortunately around at the moment. But I think like you say, Matt, he's got good pace, but I don't look at him in the same way as I look at the likes of Leclerc, I mean, obviously Leclerc hasn't won as many races as him, but you can tell that he's got that something about him, something special about him. Same with Lando, same with Max, obviously.
Yeah. I think I think Bottas just lacks that killer instinct, like Christian Horner says, I'm going to use a bit of bad language here, but that fuck you attitude, he doesn't have it. I mean, he sort of give it the old, to who this may concern, but I think he can say it, but he hasn't got it, unfortunately.
Yeah, he sort of touched upon that himself in that episode. Like when they asked him to move over for Lewis, I think it was a couple of years ago, and he's made that vow like never again, I'm never going to do it again. But while I get that, obviously it's a team sport, and as a Ferrari fan, the history there speaks for itself. But it's difficult for him, like you say. He doesn't want to be a rear gunner. He doesn't want to be the whipping boy or the water boy. He wants to win races. He's in the sport because he wants to win. So for him to, it's again, like Rubens Barrichello, like I think he's a very similar class of driver to Rubens. He is a great number 2. I just don't think he would be a great number 1, because there is a big difference, in my opinion.
Yeah. Cool. So then the series takes the jump over to Maranello and to the Ferrari boys. Now, I've expressed this online a few times, my thoughts about, I mean, I'm not a Ferrari fan, but I know
not everyone's perfect. It's fine.
I know how important Ferrari is to the sport. I mean, obviously they touch on this in the series quite a lot. They are the oldest running team. They were there from the start. They've got tons of history. I think someone said in that if you ask a kid to draw a racing car, it's a red car. I can vouch for that. I think it was Will Buxton. Yeah, I've got a 6-year-old. He loves red, and he loves red cars. So I know I know that, but it's for me the most distressing part is seeing how they've dealt with 4 times world champion Sebastian Vettel, and it's public.
That was absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. Even sugarcoat it a little bit. I think agree with you, as a Ferrari man, I when Seb was at Red Bull, I wasn't a fan of him because I'm a Ferrari man. Unless you're in that red suit, I'm not a fan of you. When he went to Ferrari, it was like, yes, we've got this. I mean, prior to him, Ferrari had Alonso and Raikkonen, 2 double world champions in their own right, vastly experienced, and again, on their day, 2 of the best drivers that have arguably ever been in the sport.
But by the way, Tom, Raikkonen only won the championship once.
Oh, he won it at McLaren and Ferrari.
No,
2007, mate.
Oh wow! Well, he was Ferrari's last world champion, so
you dreamed that one.
Oh no, sorry. No, he lost it by 1 point, didn't he? At one point?
Yes.
My favourite image of Raikkonen in a McLaren was stopping at Monaco and just straight onto the yacht, straight into the beer, lad.
Kimi's just absolutely class. Like you watch, like the radio transcripts between Kimi and his team. Like, okay, you need to push now, Kimi. I know what I'm doing. Leave me alone. He's absolutely quality.
I would have liked to see more of him in this series.
It's just not his scene, though, is it, mate?
He doesn't like it, but he's just so entertaining by not being entertaining.
Yeah. He's like anti-entertainment. But
I think when they asked him to smile, he was like,
yeah. That he is smiling. That's a smile. Well, I think the first thing that he says when he's on screen, like the producer says to him, like, "I see. How do you feel about interviews?" He's like, "I hate him." Just
great start. That's our man.
But coming back to Ferrari and Vettel and the way that was handled, like you say, that was absolutely awful. Because I feel like, you do really get the impression that it was a conversation that was had very publicly. In terms of Ferrari announced it sort of before they'd had a real conversation with Seb. And it's sort of, as we'll come to a bit later on, sort of similar to how Racing Point handled it with Perez. But the way that the disrespect that they showed to Seb, who, let's face it, has been in a very, at points in his Ferrari career, it's been awful. The car itself, last season notwithstanding as well. And he's still been consistently pushing. So the last couple of seasons he's had issues. It now firmly looks like Maranello are putting all of their baskets putting all of their eggs in the Leclerc basket, which I kind of understand. I get it. He's got great pace and he's young.
Although don't count out Carlos Sainz. He is a very mature driver. And do you know what I like about Sainz is he is serious. He is dead serious on being good, and he's got a great coach as well. You think of Carlos Sainz Senior. He's, the amount of championships that guy's won, and I think as well, as soon as he started getting, I know we're digressing off the point here, but as soon as Sainz started getting serious in F1, he immediately shook off that stigma of being son of a world champion, for sure. Yep. He just immediately proved himself. Raz, I don't know if do you agree with that one?
Yeah, I've got a question for you both, but especially Tom, given that you were such a Ferrari fanatic, which I can understand, because I was one when Schumacher was driving for him. But but I've got a question for you. Do you think Carlos Sainz is allowed to win races at Ferrari?
I think so.
Yeah. I think Ferrari have been very clear when a favorite becomes apparent. When they so I think at the beginning of the season, they kind of, unless it's Michael Schumacher, they give their two drivers an equal chance, especially now, where both of them are sort of in the same boat. So Charles won 4 Grand Prix, is it? Not even that, 3. And Sainz has won none. But they're both around about the same age. Sainz is the more experienced driver, but not at this level of a team. I think you have to give them both an equal footing, and then let the hierarchy naturally develop. Yeah, but then go with that.
I've got a question for you. Why did they give? So you're telling me that they're not favouring Leclerc, yeah? But why did they give him a 5-year contract?
I think that's
He's
partly.
Ferrari's. Will Buxton says,
Yeah.
"Oh, he's Ferrari's future." Do you know?
Yeah, exactly.
The fans love him. He speaks Italian. You know,
So did Seb, though. To be fair, grazie.
Well, Seb learned. I don't know whether he spoke fluent before, but you know, Seb's a clever guy.
At Toro Rosso, they're Italian there, so you probably think he probably had some Italian, but yeah. No, sorry, Matt, go on.
No. I was going to say. So I think that with he's got the whole story, the history, you know, in terms of like, you know, he's definitely pulled on the heartstrings of Italy with, you know, the story of his, you know, unfortunately what happened with his dad. And obviously then George Bianchi as well, you know,
and Antoine Hubert in 19 as well.
Well, yeah, I just think he's already sort of like one of the most famous people in Italy, you know, and they love him.
He's Mr. Ferrari. He is Mr. Ferrari.
Yeah, he's everything they want in a driver. I mean, yeah, I think if he was Italian, it would be better.
No.
He's almost there, but I think they just love him. I mean,
and I also think that his age plays a huge part in it. He's 22, 23. And he's showing that ability already. You have to sign him down. Let's be honest.
Oh, he can definitely.
Red Bull have had Max on a contract for a long time.
He can give Max a definite run for his money, and on his day, he probably can beat Max.
Well, look at last season. Okay, so sorry, not last season, 19. Okay, so there were questions about the Ferrari engine, especially towards the latter part of the season. But you look at the earlier parts of the season, look at the battle that they had Britain at Silverstone, Austria. And that was before any question about their engine. Like those questions sort of happened after the mid-season break, when they just all of a sudden became this super-powered behemoth.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I genuinely think that not only does Charles have the pace, he also has the maturity and the ability to look at himself seriously as well. Look at Turkey. He's his own biggest critic. Yeah,
and he doesn't hide it either. He's very vocal about it on the radio.
And then the maturity to then say, looking at Turkey specifically, again, not covered in the series, but looking at Turkey at the end of the race, so he's really annoyed with himself. He still then has the wherewithal to say, congratulations to Seb. He's had a really tough season. He deserves this. This is a 22-year-old guy. I think that shows incredible maturity. I can't see many other drivers full stop doing something like that, let alone someone of his age and, you know, time in the sport.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, before we move on to the next series, the next episode, just want to touch on the fact that Ferrari, you know, obviously they got told they couldn't use their electrical advantage in the engines, so I think that has obviously played a big part in their sort of drop, you know, completely out of contention for anything. And you know, it's heartbreaking seeing that team qualifying like 15th, 17th, you know, not even sometimes a few times not even making it out of Q1. You know, they'll be lucky to get into Q3. And I think, you know, that is hard to watch. And I really hope that, as well for his sake.
Mr. Ferrari wouldn't be happy.
No, not at all.
You 100%. Enzo would be going absolutely mental. I mean, it's interesting that
it's not the first time they've been there. Do you know?
No.
I mean, you know, if you look in the early 90s, sort of mid 90s, they were nowhere as well, and you didn't really start getting anywhere until 96. Do you know? So
Schumacher was their first world champion since what? Joachim Rindt? Oh, Scheckter. Sorry, yep. And that was 14 years prior.
Yeah.
So, like you say, they've got experience in this. But I think what's interesting for Ferrari in this sense is that throughout their history in the sport, they've always had the best engine. Always. Whether it was a naturally aspirated engine, whether a turbocharged engine, they always had great straight line speed and good power off the corner. You look at teams like Red Bull. Red Bull were always known for their ability to go around a corner really quickly, whereas Ferrari were known for their straight line speed. So for their issues I think that's kind of what contributed to their performance last season. In that, obviously, we were expecting a rule change this season, but because of COVID, it got delayed till next season. So they hadn't necessarily developed that car in terms of the chassis and the aero as much as they might have. And I think that goes for all of the teams. But then losing that engine performance, as well as having a car, like, the actual bodywork of a car that wasn't necessarily great. That's why we see them languishing down in the midfield. But like I say, I mean, it's awful for a fan to see them down there, and I think it doesn't do a great advert for the sport, because when you think of, like they said in that episode, when you think of Formula One, you think of Ferrari. You don't think of Red Bull. You don't think of Toro Rosso or Alfa Tauri. You think of Ferrari.
Comes to mind,
McLaren, but even then, you still need to know a little bit about the sport to think of McLaren. Whereas any person will have heard of Michael Schumacher. Any person would have heard of Ferrari.
Well, you got Lewis Hamilton now. everyone's
100%.
Mercedes. So, but that's a really good point. Okay, moving on. Sorry, we digress. Okay, so moving on to my favourite part of the whole series, and probably he's moving into one of my favourite. I mean, I don't really have favourite drivers, but he's coming to be one of my favourites, and that is young Pierre Gasly. And so I think the episode sort of starts off with how he lost his seat at Red Bull. And and it was done at the worst time of year for him, when he lost his best friend at Spa, and he's saying it was the worst time of his life, and I 100% believe that. And then he obviously lost it to Alex Albon, and Alex Albon hasn't really been performing. Have Red Bull got it wrong? Have Marco and Horner made the wrong decision? You can sort of see the tension, because when Horner arrives at Spa in 2020, he's like, "Don't talk to me about Pierre." You can see there's a little bit of. I was like, okay. I thought there was a little bit of bit of tension there.
I think they added a little bit of context, because I think it was like they just had to put down one of their dogs or something like that.
I get that.
So you get it in a sense, but it's like, come on, mate, like, you're literally, this is the business that you're in.
They're going to ask you about it.
They're going to ask you about it. But I think to sort of come on to what you were saying about did they make the wrong decision with Albon?
Yes.
I don't see why they needed to make a decision in the first place.
They did mid-season as well. I thought that was very. I mean, I know they did that with Kvyat and Max, and it paid off. I don't know whether they thought they were going to do the same thing.
But it was also much earlier in the season as well. Like that was after.
And also another thing to consider is, I do believe that was it Marco or Horner or both of them? They said we give Albon until the end of the season.
Yeah, well, even that's a bit unfair. Pierre didn't get that treatment. But the best part of that is when he sat in his car and his friend's driving into the circuit. Apart from obviously what we're going to say in a minute, but he sat in the car and he gets the news on his phone that obviously he's not going to get the Red Bull seat, even though he's outperformed that AlphaTauri. And he's like, well, let's get some points then. You know,
on the way to, where were they on the way to? Exactly. And
I thought that was brilliant. And I'm so glad that Netflix picked that bit up and they were with him that weekend, because it really did, you know. And I thought as well, watching that race, and I watched that race as well, and then watching it back on Netflix, I thought that he was so calm, collected, cool,
mature.
He was there the whole time. He was just like, and you know,
in a very testing Grand Prix as well.
Oh yeah. There was a lot going on, you know, and the whole time he was on it. You could tell his brain was working 1,000 miles an hour when you're like, Leclerc's out. Yep, okay. What's happening with Lewis? He stopped. You know, I've got signs behind me. You know, and he really did keep calm, and I think that shows such a level of maturity with Pierre, and he has a point to prove as well. And you know, I get really okay. So when drivers have their onboard bit and then they show a little bit of emotion at the end of a race, you know, sometimes I just think that's really put on, and they just try to act it. I'm sorry to say it's about drivers, because I've got massive respect for them, but you know, they try to copy Senna a little bit. You know, they try to show a little bit of, you know, emotion and stuff like that. But when Pierre went crazy when he won the race, and then when he did it last year in Brazil, you just feel the emotion and the passion, and he really, I was so happy for him, and I thought that was, for me, that's the best part of the series.
Yeah. I mean, that podium from that race in general was an amazing podium. Like three guys, you know, three of the young talents in the sport, and you know, as we touched on them earlier, Lance Stroll was up there, Carlos Sainz was up there, and that battle between Sainz and Gasly for the win at the end of the race,
that was great.
Some of the best bits of racing, like, because you can tell that they're pushing each other, and like you say, like Gasly is showing that maturity. Midfield cars, not used to leading races. Gasly's showing that maturity to keep his head, just keep putting in, hit your braking marks, hit your turning points, accelerate. Just drive the car. Just drive the car. Don't overdrive the car. Just drive the car, and it will take care of itself. You know,
I really like his mechanic as well. His mechanic is really nice. You know, he's just like, be up here. You know, obviously, you know.
It's like when at the end of the race, when he's having his little celebrating the car, and he's like, "What do we do, guys?"
Yeah,
and his mechanic, his race engineer is just like, "We won the race."
Yeah. Oh, that was great, and he still had his own shoulders to thank the team, thank Honda, thank the mechanics. And I just thought that was absolutely great. And the fact that he had done all of that, you know, if you watch as well, when he's celebrating, they're all getting into these photos, and obviously he's like that, I haven't called my parents yet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
Tearing their hair out. So I think that was for me, that was one of the highlights. I don't know what what do you think, Raz?
And I think actually they have made Red Bull have made a mistake.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've got, it wasn't Urban, it was you know, it was Pierre who they said, oh, we're going to give until the end of the season, and then they didn't stick to that word, and then but I think Red Bull are seriously regretting that, but I think they just can't admit that they made a mistake.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, that's sort of Red Bull all over, though, isn't it? I mean, you know, I don't want to talk down the guy because he's done amazing since he's been in the sport, but you get the impression from Christian Horner that it's, I'm the big I am.
It's pride.
I'm the
pride.
big man. You will not go against me. I've said this, and that's what we're doing. And obviously, when you've got a massive, massive company behind you like Red Bull, there's going to be that expectation, especially the success they had from 2010 onwards. But is there, and I don't want to, sort of make it lay on any sort of excuses for anyone. But is there an argument that says that? So obviously they back Max 100%, and I understand that he is a generational talent.
That second seat, but has always been a problem.
Is it the case? Is it the case, right, that the car is so set up for Max and his style of driving, which has been well documented to be very, very different to a lot of other drivers, that no matter who you stick in that car, they're not going to get the same level of performance out of it because it's just not right. And especially when you stick a rookie in it, maybe sticking someone like Sergio Perez, who's been around the block a little bit.
I was about to say that. I mean, this year is going to be the telltale, where this Perez is at the top of his form. He's just won a race. He's on fire at the moment. He's experienced. He's been with big teams before. He's been with McLaren. He's been with Racing Point. He's been there for a number of years. He knows how a race car is supposed to behave. So I think that this year will just tell, and I think Red Bull know that. So
it's the first time they've been outside their own driver pool since they came into the sport, really.
Well, yeah, I mean, because I think he's going to be a Mark Webber Perez, really. So I think that's.
Do you think he goes into there knowing that?
I think Perez is just going to race his own race. I think he's not scared of. I mean, as we've seen with Ocon, he is not scared of putting a teammate into the wall.
literally.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
It's also interesting. Sorry, just before we move on to the next one, it's also interesting because it'll be the first time where the money that Perez brings into a team isn't a factor. Like they don't need his money.
No.
Whereas Force India / Racing Point definitely needed.
He could call. I mean, before the Strolls came along, he could call the shots at a team like that.
Exactly. I mean, and even before that, Sauber. Sauber, yes, they had backing from big companies, but they weren't a big team. They needed all the sponsorship money. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see, because he's now just able to focus on his own racing.
Yeah.
But now in the dynamic of a huge team like Red Bull, it would be interesting to see how the dynamic between him and Max actually goes, because Max is very much, I'm the man in this team, and the team acknowledges that as well.
Yeah, they should probably change it to Team Max, but
perhaps. But yeah, I think it's a good thing for Perez, and I think it's a shame for Pierre. But
yeah, well, I think he'll be contending for race wins as well. I mean, he's had a really strong testing this year. He's done a lot of laps. I can't remember the exact figure, but he's done. He's had a really strong test, and he's again showing pace. So I think he's a clear number one driver at that team, and I can only see him getting better. I think, before we move on to the next subject, I think that if he doesn't go to Red Bull, a top team is going to snap him up. So
I think a lot of, I know we're looking to cover this later point, but I think a lot of how the driver lineup shapes up for 22 depends on what happens at Mercedes. This season.
And then happens. Well, we all know that if Lewis wins number 8, then adios muchacho. So
and not only that, but if he does win it, will Bottas then stay, and then as we sort of touched on earlier, try and get that one at least for himself, or will Mercedes just go for a whole clean new lineup? Let's not forget that Ocon is part of their. Let's not forget that Ocon is part of their driver academy So and he's shown good pace throughout his entire career, really. So it'd be interesting to see how it pans out.
Yeah. Cool. So the series then takes a turn towards our favorite F1 personality, Mr. Gunther Steiner, and his team of fucking rock stars. So, I think we'll move it into one, because I think there's one or two series episodes, on that. You've got Gunther's Choice, where so we can talk about Haas as an entity in Drive to Survive, and then it moves over to Man on Fire. And I think, first of all, I think the Haas story is great. I love it. I think that obviously Gunther's Choice is about delivering bad news to his adopted sons, which I think is great. I think someone said that, they're his adopted sons, and tell you they're not going to be racing for him anymore. And it's a shame, because I think Haas is such a nice family, and he knows that. He was just like, I just want, steady income, the same drivers, everyone can enjoy themselves, but we need income. And as Raz has pointed out, so they go to try and get some big sponsors. They need a cash injection at Haas. Gene can't keep just chucking money at this Formula One team that isn't performing as well as it should do.
I mean, we've seen it throughout history that just does not work.
And didn't he actually say that he doesn't want to put money into? He doesn't want to keep on pouring money.
Yeah, in a phone conversation between the two, Gene Haas said to Gunther, like, I don't want to keep putting money into this when it's clearly not going anywhere. Basically.
Yeah, I mean, he's been debating pulling out for a few years now, and I remember in Drive to Survive season 2 was it, where Gunther famously tears Kevin and Roman, just tears them a new one, and literally tells them, I don't want this guy to keep wasting his money on YouTube, because they just want to keep taking each other out. I mean, they're both they're proper racing drivers. Those two, they are both seat on your pants. They do or die. The pair of them.
Get your shoulders out and send it.
And Robbie, I think they both would do very well racing in America. Robin is racing and all that. So
not too many turns. It should be all right.
I think it was time. We all knew it was coming. It was time for Haas. I mean, we were all surprised they kept Grosjean on for so many years. We all knew it was coming. And I really like this about this. But about this, they touch on Haas and their relationship with obviously having the same engine supplier as Alfa Romeo. And I love the banter between, I can't remember his name. I don't know what, it's gone from my head.
Fred Vassar.
Yes, between him and Steiner. And I quite like that. I thought that was quite nice for them to show that. And I loved actually seeing a little bit about Giovinazzi. I thought and him talking to his family as well. I thought that was really nice.
Giovinazzi is an interesting sort of character.
Yeah.
Because he's the first Italian since Fisichella and Trulli.
I think Trulli was the last entrant.
And when you consider the history of the sport in Italy and the Italian history in the sport, that's
it's strange. There's not many
exactly. And for him to, I mean, so he was / is part of the Ferrari Driver Academy.
Yeah.
I think they technically released him when he signed for Alfa, but he's obviously still part of their group network.
He's still a Ferrari driver. I mean,
but interesting that they then took that. The way the series sort of portrayed it, there was obviously with Mick Schumacher going into the sport, having won F2. It was interesting to see that sort of. is Gio going to get a seat? Full stop. I think it would have been unfair for him to not have a seat because I think he is a talented driver.
He's got a little bit. He needs a little bit more time. He needs a little bit more coach. It's great that he's obviously sharing that team with Kimi because he's got someone very seasoned to obviously learn off of.
Yeah, the elder statesman on the grid, giving him a guiding hand.
I love seeing those two together. I think they're great. But then I got a question for Raz. How great is it to see Mick Schumacher in a driving a Ferrari powered car? But now, how great was it for you to see him in Drive to Survive?
To be honest with you, I think it's great to see him. Don't get me wrong, but we need to stop comparing him
to his dad.
With his dad, because, and I think Tom is not going to agree with me on what I'm going to say next, but I think, although it's pretty likely that Mick will either replace Leclerc or Sainz in the future, I think Mick shouldn't drive for Ferrari.
All right.
And the only reason I say that is because of the success that his dad had.
Yeah.
Tarnishing the name.
Yeah.
Do you think you'd be or do you think you'd like to see Mick at maybe, before we go on to the rest of this point, would you like to see Mick at Mercedes?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what you're getting at.
Because
it's kind of a case of I think he's a really good driver. I just don't want him to drive for them.
What, Mercedes?
Yeah, well, no, like from Raz's point of view.
Yeah.
But
he's a good driver, but I don't want him at Ferrari.
No, because it's not tarnishing the name. I mean, you think about this logically, right? Vettel and Schumacher Senior are best mates. Yeah, they are best mates, and when Vettel signed for Ferrari, the German media said, "Oh, he's gonna win championship, and he's gonna win championship."
Yeah.
And
I think it's too much pressure.
Yes.
It's the pressure and the fact that, as we sort of touched on earlier, like that the team hasn't been able to produce a consistent car since probably 2005. Really, like it's been up and down constantly. I get where you're coming from, Raz. I think that from an emotional standpoint, from your heart, you'd love to see that name
back in
on that car, in those colours. I think he needs a couple of seasons to prove himself, because F2 is a very, very different sport to F1. But winning in F2 shows that and the way that he won last season as well shows that he's got good race ability. He's got good race awareness. He can do the racing business of passing other guys on the track. But the actual act of a Formula One car, it behaves so much differently to an F2 car, and there's so much more going on that and this is sort of touching on what we were saying earlier about Red Bull and the way that they've used their driver academy. So you look at Charles Leclerc; he had 2 seasons at Alfa Romeo before they put him into a Ferrari, learning his trade, learning the way that the sport works. Whereas Gasly had 1 season at Toro Rosso into Red Bull. Albon had half a season at Toro Rosso into Red Bull. And
I think the driver that's actually had it the sweetest, and you never notice any of his mistakes because he's been very well protected, is George Russell. You know, all he has to do is beat his teammate. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, again, obviously part of the Mercedes family, and he's in, apologies Raz, but he's in the worst performing car on the grid. Or at least that's where he started. They've taken steps forward. But they're not expected to do anything. So he can learn how to do Formula One. But then, you know, as we saw watching the races, when he stepped into that Mercedes to cover at Bahrain, or Sakir as it was, no, Bahrain wasn't it? Whichever.
You know the one you mean.
He, you know, different cars drive differently. We know that from our road cars.
Right. I mean, it doesn't help that George is like a good half a foot taller than Lewis.
Yeah,
you know.
Exactly. And the car is obviously set up for Lewis. He had to wear boots that were a size or two too small.
It looked uncomfortable. The onboards looked uncomfortable.
Yeah. But he's clearly got the ability. He's clearly got the ability, because until the pit stops, he was dominating that race. Didn't look like he was in trouble at all.
No. But sheer will alone, he was going to win that race.
Yeah, but then again, Drive to Survive didn't cover that.
No, unfortunately not.
So going on, you touched on Sakir and that circuit. Now, to quote the late great Murray Walker, he used to say, "Formula One is drama." And
I thought you were going to go with another quote of Murray's there, that there's nothing wrong with his car except it's on fire.
Yeah, no, but good point.
It would be apt.
Yeah, it would be. But then I tell you, I mean, I think that was done brilliantly. I mean, I never saw. I mean, it was like watching it in HD, and you see him squirming around in the car when Roman had his crash. And I think that, even though I know what had happened, I was watching the series thinking, "Oh my God, is he going to be all right?"
Squirming, yeah, yeah. I remember watching it live. And so a lot of my time spent watching Formula One is on my phone, because I don't have Sky. I can't. I'm not paying for Sky. It's way too expensive. So I watch a lot of it on my phone. And I remember watching it, and the missus, we sat on the sofa, and the missus was watching her TV, and pardon my French here, but I was like, fuck, because it was literally so I didn't see Jules Bianchi's crash live. I didn't see Antoine Hubert's crash live. So I didn't see those two tragic occasions. But I saw this live, and live, it took me back to, well, actually, in terms of seeing things live, I don't think I've ever seen an event as mad as that. I was too young to see Senna live. And just the entire, as I say, event, we'll call it the event, because it was like if Hollywood wanted to make a piece of, a big crash in Formula One, that's exactly how they would do it. And it was, I remember watching it, and as I say, the expletives were rolling out, and watching the episode on Netflix. Obviously, that's on a very quick part of that's on a straight. It's a very quick part of the track on what's a very quick track.
140,
anyway.
160.
Yeah, So even the guys, even the other drivers, so not Roman himself, even the other drivers, driving away from that at 140 mile an hour, 150, 60 as they're accelerating. All they would have seen in their tiny little mirrors, which are awful, as is well documented on a Formula One car, all they would have seen is a ball of fire.
Yeah.
If that. But there's a very poignant, if you want, radio communique from Charles Leclerc to his race engineer and Ferrari in general, and where he says, "Oh my God, that was big. That was big. Are they okay?"
I think the warming thing that I took away from that was just how much the other drivers really did care, and the teams, everybody was instantly affected. And
yeah, I mean, there was people crying, like, you know,
it
was
the people watching it. You heard, like, when they had the camera that was opposite watching him trying to get out of the car, you'd hear like the parts of the crowd, obviously, that we stood there were just screaming. You know, I mean, it was very, very traumatic. And the thing what I love about Drive to Survive is it brought in the human element, and I love the interview they did with Roman and bringing his wife on as well, and seeing Gunther's reaction, and the fact that he was just like, which I remember quite categorically, he was saying to his guy at the team, you know, I want to find out the names of the two medical guys and the firemen, you know, and you know, you wouldn't get to see that.
Well, there's that moment between Roman and the stewards that ran towards him, ran towards the firewall that contained Roman. When Roman went to the Grand Prix the week after, hands wrapped up, not able to race. And he says to him, "Was it you that ran towards me?"
Yeah.
And just gives him a massive hug, like, you know. And you know, listening to Roman talking about it, I mean, God willing, none of us will ever be in that situation. Obviously, we'll never be in that situation in a Formula One car, but in general, we'll never be in that sort of situation. But the way that Roman speaks about it, you really do get the sense of a man that had accepted the situation that he was in. And then, you know, the romance element comes into it, like, oh, my kids, I want to look at, you know, I can't, like, this can't be the end. But even, you know, like that moment of clarity that he had, the way he describes it is like, if you've not seen it already, like there's a graphic that shows actually how the crash happens, like exactly the impacts of how it happened. It was produced by the FIA, I believe, and it shows the monocoque that Roman is in on its side, which I didn't get. I mean, the damage that you see of the monocoque at the like after they've managed to put the fire out, you can't tell up from down. But what it shows, like, is that when the crash is sort of the fallout from the crash, Roman in the monocoque is on its side, trying to get through the barrier, on his side. So that's why he couldn't. When he tried to go up, like, he wasn't. You know, he's all he could see around him is fire, and you know. Listening to him describe that situation, it's
terrifying,
harrowing. And it kind of brings you back, as I say, like, you know, it brings you back to the, like, I've seen documentaries about the 70s, for instance. The 70s were awful for drivers. I mean, like, they used to say, like, you know, it was almost every weekend you went into it expecting someone to die. And I can't remember the name of the driver. It was I think it was at Zolder or Spa when they crashed into a barrier, which was basically a hay bale, and the car just went up in flames. And then other drivers were stopping because the fire marshals didn't have fireproof suits, so the drivers were stopping to help them. And you look at that and how far we've come in the sport as a result of people like Jackie Stewart and the fallout after Senna.
Sid Watkins.
Sid Watkins, 100%.
I mean, it was down to Sid Watkins. I think they mentioned this in the series where it was his idea to have the medical car follow the grid on the first lap. And I mean, I think those guys in that medical car, they really did do a massively great job. And 100%. I love how they interviewed them as well. And I thought that was really good.
I've got to say, and this, I normally try and do the review straight after. Like I do the review for the race. But that time I just went to bed, and they're like, I do the review the next day. And actually I tweet out before, like during the race, I said, I don't care whatever happens. The main thing is that Roman is okay. And I actually said in my review of that race, if Roman wouldn't have survived, I would have stopped watching Formula One.
Wow.
It's big. Yeah. I mean, when I was watching it, I even said, as I say, I was watching it on the phone with the missus next to me, and I said, like, I would be surprised if he walks away from that. I think it was just a combination of effort and energy created by just the relentless charge from F1 and the F1 management and Ross and
Brawn
the drivers,
in particular.
and the drivers themselves as well.
And Roman being head of the Drivers Association for safety. Even though he was against the halo. I
was just about to say that. Ironic in a sense, but
and now he's like, definitely like the halo. I think that I mean, the fact as well that they had these new suits that were 17% heavier, but they could keep off fire for longer. They got the new gloves, tear off the visors, and I think that you cannot make this sport 100% safe. It is always going to be dangerous. I mean, I was watching a race last season, a Caterham race with one of my friends as a driver, and one of the cars was hit and caught fire. The driver was fine, but it's just fire is a constant worry because you're dealing with fuel, and the fuel as strong as they make these fuel cells. I mean, I think that the car is designed to crumple to absorb energy, but you cannot make these fuel cells 100% unrupturable because they're hitting crazy speeds. Something sometimes can fail like the barrier did. It's not a safe sport, and I think a lot of drivers were able to get their point across by saying this is not a safe sport. We are always putting ourselves on the line and in danger for entertainment, and I get that side of it, which I think nicely leads us on to our last point, unless anyone's got anything else they want to say.
No.
So the season finale, and I know this is a fan favorite, and it was. I mean, there was 2 more episodes after that, I think, or there was the last one, and
one more,
I think Sergio Perez obviously has been dealt a similar hand to Gasly, and where his team have just dropped him. And even though, I mean, how bad would it have been if he, amazing that he won the race, and that picture of him, jumping out of the car, putting his hands up, and then all the fireworks going off in the background. It's it's amazing. That's you couldn't have timed that better. How crazy would it have been if he didn't won the race and didn't get a drive the following year. That would have been
But the one thing to consider is, and I found that quite telling. I don't know about you guys, that Lawrence Stroll actually said, "I hope Red Bull take him."
Yeah. And you know, again, I feel sorry for Alex. I think it's sad that he lost his seat. Kvyat also lost his seat, which not really a lot of people seem to mind.
No,
I think Danny Kvyat had sort of like, he's a talented driver, but I think he's gone as far as he could go in F1. It's nice to see Tsunoda
I think that's fair.
coming in. I think Tsunoda could be quite good for the future. I know that
well, that's the whole point of AlphaTauri, isn't it? It's for Red Bull to bring their new breed in. So.
And he's also obviously Japanese. They have a Japanese engine supplier. It's a no-brainer. But in terms of like, so the season finale with Perez winning that race, I think that literally got everybody in tears. The guys tried so hard over the years. He really did try. I mean, dropping from what was it, last pretty much, and then actually winning the race. I mean, that
last on the track,
It's worrying. It is worrying how much pace that car actually had because it was on it.
This is where it kind of brings into discussion or bears discussion that. So when someone of Seb Vettel's quality becomes available, you have to go for him. You have to, especially if you're an Aston Martin, Racing Point, whatever. You have to go for it because Mercedes. There was an opportunity for Mercedes to go for him because they weren't sure what was going on with their driver lineup, and I think they had a conversation.
Apparently, he had a conversation with Seb had a conversation with Red Bull as well, I believe.
Yeah. But I think what that shows, the fact that he's eventually gone or agreed with Aston Martin, is that the two big teams that he had the conversation with, Merck and Red Bull, he would have gone in there wanting to be of at least equal status to the existing drivers, and the existing drivers would have been Lewis and Max respectively at Mercedes and Red Bull. So I think what's happened is that they've said, no, come on, that's not going to happen. So he's then had that conversation with Lawrence Stroll, and let's be honest, Daddy's not going to get rid of his son just yet. So if the next available seat after Mercedes and Red Bull was Aston Martin potentially, and it wasn't going to be Lance losing his seat. So it's sad for Perez, but I think he's got a great opportunity now to take his career to where he wants it to be. I don't think he's going to win a world championship. I don't think he's going to win a world championship, but he is going to set Red Bull, because last season he was Mr. Consistent. Apart from the races he didn't finish, he scored points in every race.
Horner's massive point is we need a driver. I mean, God knows how many times we heard him say, we need a driver that can step it up when Max doesn't do very well. Do you know, that's what they want.
So what we need to do is sign a 20-year-old who's never driven the car before, right? That's never going to work. So fair play to Red Bull. They have a business model. They have an idea of how they want to operate in the sport, and it's done great. It's done. When it works, it really works. But it's only worked properly on 2 occasions, and one of those is only half worked at the moment because he hasn't won anything in terms. He hasn't won a world championship. And when they did win their world championships, it's because they'd exploited the rules and to their absolute benefit. And it's ironic in that sense that whenever anyone does anything that exploits the rules, who's the first person that complains? Mr. Horner. I mean, that's what the sport is. It's a hugely political sport. But I think, as I say, it's a great opportunity for Red Bull to actually take the fight to Mercedes now, because they have two drivers that have more than enough ability to score points on a regular basis.
Well, I think that then sort of brings us nicely to the conclusion. I think they ended up. I mean, there was a big point in them saying how literally this is going to be the rise of Red Bull, because so Max dominated the last race, and he's going to want to come back winning as well. And the fact as well that they were saying that obviously hiring a new driver, they put that on Netflix, Drive to Survive, and that I think Red Bull are very, very transparent on this documentary as well, which is really nice to see. I think that literally how testing has gone, I think Red Bull are again, they're on it, and Mercedes. Yeah, we could argue whether they're sandbagging or whether they're just actually ironing out some technical issues. But I think the general feeling actually from Drive to Survive and from what is going on at the moment is that they have, I mean, Horner said it himself, they have put in a massive effort to catch up to Mercedes. And I think that's just showing now. I think really Mercedes are going to have a fight on their hands this year.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as easy as they've had it previously. They don't look like. I think maybe it's maybe you could argue that they're now focusing on 22 because the car was so dominant over the last 7 years. They're now shifting their focus to 22, where we've got this big rule changes coming in. But ultimately, as they like saying in the sport, you're only as good as your last race. And exactly, you're only as good as your last race. And the last race, Red Bull were, as you say, fantastic under Max. And if testing is anything to go by, they look like they've got a really good package. So it's going to be a really interesting season coming up. I'm not going to lie, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. So, cheers for doing this episode with me, guys.
No worries at all.
Absolute pleasure. We hope to do some more.
My first venture into YouTubing, eh?
Same.
I'm so close to 1,000 subscribers. It would really mean the world to me if we can get that.
Get it over the line.
Get it over the line. I've got a really good video planned for the moment. I'm gonna release at the moment that I hit 1,000 subscribers. I also leave a link to my merch shop. So if you want to get yourself some merchandise,
click in the box.
And cheers for coming on, guys. And did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was great fun. Yeah, great fun.
It's good to talk about Formula One. It's can't wait for the season to get underway. Tomorrow is the day. So
tomorrow's the day, yeah. So I'm gonna edit this and then hopefully release it today or tomorrow.
Great.
Good stuff.
And then speak to you soon, guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Take care of yourself. Stay safe. Great to see you all.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.